All right, today we're diving into a fascinating political analysis. It lays out a hypothetical scenario for the United States, specifically from 2025 to 2028, looking at a system that's being put under some serious stress. And it all kicks off with one really counterintuitive idea. So this is the central question, the one the entire analysis is built around. I mean, it sounds like a total paradox, doesn't it? You lose an election, you're supposed to have less power, not more. But this report argues that the exact opposite could happen, setting off a kind of domino effect that could challenge the very foundations of government.
And here's the logic behind that paradox. The analysis suggests that once a leader no longer has to worry about re-election, a huge constraint is just gone. You know, those political guardrails that normally keep things in check? They can just disappear. And according to the report, this opens a window for some pretty radical actions aimed right at the structure of the government itself.
Now, to really get what this scenario is about, we need to understand a key term from the report: a systemic attack. And look, this isn't about normal policy disagreements, like taxes or healthcare. We're talking about deliberate moves to break the machinery of government, to paralyze institutions and chip away at the democratic norms that make them function in the first place. So, the whole chain of events in this analysis begins with one specific hypothetical incident. The president's party suffers a defeat in the 2025 local elections. Now, you'd think that might lead to some moderation, right? But this report suggests the opposite, that the loss actually acts as a powerful trigger for radicalization.
So what's the very first domino to fall in this hypothetical? The analysis predicts that this election loss would ignite an all-out civil war right inside the Republican Party, a really fierce battle for control and for the future soul of the party.
The report describes the party splitting into two distinct camps with completely opposite takeaways from the loss. On one side, you've got the MAGA loyalists. Their diagnosis: the party lost because it wasn't aggressive enough. Their solution is to double down on systemic attacks, like getting rid of the filibuster. But on the other side, you have the pragmatists. They see the exact same loss and say, whoa, our extreme agenda is the problem. We need to get back to basics and focus on what voters care about, like affordability.
This quote right here from the report really captures the new dynamic it describes. It becomes the ultimate loyalty test for candidates. Policy positions suddenly matter a lot less than just giving an absolute, unquestioning promise of allegiance. And this, the analysis says, is what sets the stage for what it calls the retribution primaries.
This internal party war then spills directly into the 2026 midterms. The report predicts a full-scale purge of anyone who isn't seen as 100% loyal. And they're not just targeting Congress, they're going after critical state-level jobs, like secretaries of state who oversee elections. The goal, it says, is to create a legislature of pure loyalists. The big risk, of course, is that these candidates might be too extreme to actually win a general election.
Okay, so while this internal battle for the party's soul is raging, the analysis describes a second, parallel offensive coming straight from the executive branch. It suggests the internal chaos is used as a kind of justification for rolling out an authoritarian playbook designed to consolidate power. Now, a huge piece of this playbook, as cited in the report, is something called Project 2025. What is that? Well, it's described as a detailed, ready-to-go blueprint for completely remaking the federal government. The core idea is to fire tens of thousands of professional, career civil servants and replace them with political appointees who are loyal, first and foremost, to the president's agenda.
The analysis breaks this playbook down into three main lines of attack. First, weaponize the Justice Department to go after political rivals. Second, use that Project 2025 plan to basically hollow out the government bureaucracy from the inside, crippling its ability to function. And third, systematically go after the agencies that protect election integrity, with the goal of making the public lose trust in the results.
And the report makes it really clear that crippling government functions isn't just some abstract political theory. It has very real, very tangible costs. It points to the economic damage from a long government shutdown as a perfect example of this paralysis in action, sucking more than $7 billion right out of the economy.
All of this, the party infighting, the attacks on institutions, it's all building toward what the analysis says is the most dangerous phase of the whole scenario, the lame duck period. We're talking about those final 2 years of a presidential term, when there's no more re-election to worry about. Electorally speaking, there's nothing left to lose.
Let's just quickly look at the timeline here to get our bearings. So after the 2026 midterms, we enter this really critical lame duck window, from 2027 up to the inauguration in 2029. According to this analysis, this is the absolute peak danger zone for a constitutional crisis.
So what would actually happen during this period? The report predicts 3 major moves. First, mass pardons for political allies, maybe on a scale we've never seen before. Second, a flood of what are known as midnight regulations. And third, one last all-out push to pack the federal courts with loyalist judges.
So what exactly are midnight regulations? Well, they're exactly what they sound like. Controversial rules that an outgoing administration rushes to put into effect at the very last minute. The report argues their purpose often isn't just about policy. It's about tying the hands of the next administration, making it incredibly difficult for them to govern effectively.
And the analysis argues that these actions aren't just isolated events. They're part of a coordinated strategy it calls poisoning the well, intentionally creating so much chaos and paralysis that the next administration, no matter who they are, is hobbled from day one.
So, if we take a step back and look at the big picture, what's ultimately at stake in this whole scenario? The analysis says we're moving beyond normal partisan politics here and into a realm that tests the fundamental stability of the American system itself.
One of the most severe risks it outlines is a direct confrontation between the federal government and the states. The report describes a hypothetical where federal power, funds, and even agents are used to pressure cities like Chicago and LA, and the potential response could be just as radical. States threatening to withhold federal tax dollars in an act the report calls fiscal disobedience.
And simmering underneath all of this institutional stress is the risk of social unrest. The report actually cites research indicating that 55.9%, more than half of the MAGA base, shows a tendency to support political violence. This figure is used in the analysis to underscore the concern that all this institutional breakdown could easily spill over into the streets.
So, to quickly recap the report's final risk assessment, it rates the risk of an internal party war as very high. The risk of government paralysis is high. A full-blown constitutional crisis during that lame duck period is rated as severe, and the threat of social violence from 2026 on is considered elevated.
So, we've just walked through this one detailed analysis of a system being pushed to its limits. We started with that strange paradox. How can losing an election make a leader more powerful? And the report's answer is that it can, but only by removing the constraint of accountability. And that really leaves us with one final, crucial question. When our democratic institutions are put under this kind of deliberate, intense stress, just how resilient are they really?